Hello, dear ones. This is your host, Alyce Dylan. Today, I wanted us to explore life beyond the veil. You're at the Indigo Rose Lounge, and this is the virtual space I hold for students, readers, people who follow along. And please know that I charge the space every day. It's in my constant awareness, and I send love and healing and upliftment here. So if you're in this space, virtual space with us, know that all you need to do is hold the intention to receive and you will. So even if you just say out loud now or in your mind that I have the intention to receive anything that's beneficial to me, and you will receive exactly what you need and this space will support you. So today I wanted to have a look at, and it's something a student of mine sent me who's beautiful soul, and she sent me a clip by Dolores Cannon. And I think we can all greatly respect and appreciate any mediums or spiritually perceptive individuals who have had such consistent output, people like Dolores Cannon. And we can also accept that the interpretation factor really does sometimes put things differently to how we understand them. So, in this particular discussion, Dolores Cannon was talking about how the world is shifting frequency right now, and higher frequencies than have ever been accounted are being recorded, and therefore there is this dislocation or disjointment for a lot of people still operating at a lower frequency, and then this higher frequency pulling you up. And then there were, I think, three symptoms that she referred to. The one is the 3 a.m. awakening, and that's just such a beautiful time where fairies talk and we can really connect. So when they wake us up at 3 o'clock, it's usually because they want to interact with us and they have something to say. So we can just be and listen and immerse ourselves in that beauty. But the other one was the ringing in the ears, and that actually for me is more of a symptom of the indigo awakening. Most indigos go through it's not real tinnitus, the faux tinnitus symptomology when they're going through their awakening cycle. And so I wanted to look at this, and this ties for me to the whole understanding of us being what angel offspring or chosen ones thrown to earth right now. And there's a lot of these mythologies going around. And one thing I really need to say here is if it makes you feel good to feel like you're the baby of an angel, then you go for that, girl. You go with that. I'm all for things that make us feel elevated, especially for most indigos after a lifetime of feeling unseen. So anything that really elevates us and makes us feel good is something that I encourage, but I also just want to hold a balance of truth with that. So let's just look at the frequency issue. Most human beings experience frequency in terms of the emotional scale. So our visceral experience of frequency is apathy, and right up through that emotional scale up to agape love and bliss. So each of those frequencies is also an emotional state, or rather, we experience those frequencies also as an emotional state. So if you're having a particularly meh day, you can be pretty sure that on this day, you're stuck in a meh frequency. Somewhere down the bottom of the rung, you've got some bugbears to work out there that are holding you in the bottom of the rung. And so when you let go of whatever that is, and if you can elevate, then you'll move up the scale, get yourself at least to contentment, and that's a higher frequency, and yay. And so ordinary, what most people call the normies experience life or experience frequency through that run, through those runs. And obviously the clearest expression of the different frequencies is emotion. There are other people, there are exceptions, of course. People who work in music often understand frequency as sound. And so that's a nice interpretation or a nice journey of discovery to go down, is to understand the different frequencies as sound. Different tuning forks make different vibrations, they vibrate at different frequencies, and there's different levels of sound that we can perceive or not. And then we understand that the range of human experience, the capacity of the ordinary human experience, is to hear or to be able to pick up a limited range of frequency. All right, so that's the normal scale. That's what normies understands, what we can even in our, lower state, understand those as frequency. So what happened did not happen today, and it didn't happen recently. It didn't even happen 10 years ago. What we're looking at is a shift that occurred 200 years ago, more or less. Approximately 200 years ago, there were a bunch of confluences and huge energetic shift. And rather than everything kind of being disrupted at once, which what happened during that time was there was a global cleansing, first of all, that took place. It was a cleansing, and there was an elevation of the ceiling. I'm going to try and explain this in really basic terms that fit into the first analogy so we don't get stuck in reaching too far to try and understand this. And so what's been rolling out over the last 200 or so years is a dynamic shift. Things have been shifting, but like the earth shifts, the tectonic shift, plate shifts here, another knock-on effect happens there, something else stands up and falls over there, and so on we go. So even when you raise the ceiling of something, it doesn't mean that that the floor also raises. No, the floor stays where it is. The ceiling gets raised. And so the breadth of human experience can now be so much easier. One thing that might explain this really well was there was a time in the human experience where people who would be shamans or seers or people who were connected with spiritual perception, they really had to work hard. They had to do a lot of rituals, take maybe some mushrooms, do some odd things to break through the ceiling of standard human perception. So they maybe came from a line of seers or a line of people, and they had a spiritual perception capacity, but they really had to break through that ceiling somehow in order to take their place as a seer or as someone that had exceptional sight from a spiritually perceptive point of view. Now, what we know about the last 200 years in the normie perspective is that the growth of the indigo, what we call the indigo child or the spiritually perceptive child, has been exponential over the last 200 years. And that wasn't that someone was putting new juice in the water. There was no change to the food that affected this. This was the raising of the ceiling of human experience. So indigo children were born and born and born. Only one in 20 of us made it to 25. We had to set the tone for the next generation, and so on and so on. So we're really about 4 or 5 generations in already to the shift. And what people are starting to see now is that the shift, the results of this significant shift are getting more demonstrable. We can now see them. We now understand that at least 40 to 45% of us, and that was the pre-pandemic figure, so we don't know how many of the spiritually perceptive were affected by that, but at least 45% of us pre-pandemic were now in the realm of spiritual perception. And what does that mean? Well, if the ceiling of human experience has been raised, and that ceiling has been raised above the frequency that our true essential spirit self exists at, Now, the indigos are being born with a natural ability to raise up our frequency and shift our awareness up to our spiritual selves, back down, up to our spiritual. There is a clear and active communication between our spiritual perception and our human reality. And that had never existed before, about 200 years ago, except in exceptional and rare cases. So now it's everywhere. Now the human capacity is that we can easily, without mushrooms or other psychedelics, we can just sitting plainly in meditation, we can reach into our spiritual perception. And of course, the first maybe generation or two of people who were able to do that were either medicated or exiled from society or just kept quiet about it and lived on a mountain somewhere. But as it's gone through, it's become more and more acceptable. And now we're in the generation where I can speak to you over YouTube and I can tell you about spiritual perception, and they're not going to come lock me up, and there's not going to be a white van that arrives. And I'm now free to be that. Whereas my grandmother was also one of us, and she got away with it being eccentric. So there has been a more gradual shift that people are really taking cognizance of. So the shift has been more gradual and the scope has opened up. And if you like, the elevator has moved up. So in our human experience, we can now shift. I can sit here today and I can shift my awareness and my understanding up to my spiritual self, my spiritual perception, and back down into my human experience without moving, without going to sit and meditate, without taking any strange psychedelics. I can sit and do that. In fact, my daily experience is the shifting of my awareness between one and the other. And that is because the ceiling of human experience was raised. The the top frequency of the human experience bandwidth was raised. And it's just now that enough of us are reaching up and elevating our frequencies and thereby affecting everything around us and sharing that shift of frequencies upwards. Yes, there are other cosmic events. I'm not going to discount those. But in terms of our individual experience, this is not something new. This is not something that happened yesterday. This that we're growing into, this path that we're on, is as a result of a significant shift that happened 2 centuries ago. So, is the sky going to fall? No. No, there's not going to be a huge cosmic rewiring or correction, or that's been happening for 200 years. This rewiring has been going on. The human physical experience takes a lot longer to shift and adjust than people are giving it credit for. It is, after all, dense and really is quite a. Mm, it's a slower engine, guys, than we understand. So there's nothing to be fearful here. There's nothing to be fearful about. If anybody is experiencing symptoms of shift, it's usually because you're in a space now where you're ready to shift. But there's not going to be a great big earth shaking adjustment that we all need to prepare ourselves for, because no, that's fear mongering again. So let's not do that. Let's just be the best spiritually perceptive human beings that we can be, understanding that this shift is going to go on. We're going to be adjusting to this shift for the next 500 to 1,000 years. This is going to be going on. The whole of humanity is going to shift. And as we shift the range of experience of the human being upward, whatever's still right at the bottom will fall off. And so I absolutely love the fact that people en masse are recognizing the shift, because it means how many of it means that there are more and more of us out there that are able to perceive these different ranges of frequencies. And that's magnificent. Knowing that there are more and more of us out there already seeing with clear eyes, already hearing truly, that is a blessing and that is beautiful. But there is nothing to worry about. The world is not going to fall over, and the sky is not going to fall. And our best days are still the best that we can do. Show up in who you are, experience the full range of your own true self, and live the best human experience you can, because that's what you came here to do. Wow, much longer than I anticipated. That took me more words to get out. So this is really going to be a long one. And I apologize for that if you had only allocated 10 minutes. So go ahead, go out there and love always.